This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, are we high on the hog or stuck in the mud? And January was warm. Did I miss the memo? And a bunny will lay down with a lamb. All that and much more on the Four Rivers Ag Report. Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta. Well, with as much grain as we grow around here, it's easy, well, at least for me, to forget a bit about our friends, the livestock producers. Luckily, I'm not the one doing the research for the USDA. A while back, I had a chance to talk to Mike Schleusener of the USDA about their livestock report and the importance of participating in the farm census. How do you go about creating a statistical model that is accurate, that farmers can plan on?
Sure. When we're going to produce a January cattle report, we'll want to draw a sample of cattle producers across the state of Illinois. We want to make sure we're measuring large, medium, and small farms, as well as northern, central, southern Illinois. The western part of Illinois is probably more cattle intensive, and our scientific sampling procedures ensure we have a good sample for Illinois producers.
So what sort of tools do you use to get those samples?
We maintain a list of farmers and ranchers in the state of Illinois. And all of the data on that database is protected by law from the Freedom of Information Act and other types of subpoena. And so with that database, we know who has reported cattle in the past and who is a large producer, who is a dairy, who's a small producer. And that helps us with our sampling scheme. So
you sample various farms and you come up with a number that you communicate. Who uses those numbers and how are they valuable?
The numbers are used in any number of ways. For instance, the people at Farm Doc will interpret those data and the economic impact of what our report says in ways that will help producers make their individual plans for their individual farm or ranch. Furthermore, all of the livestock, or rather all of the agricultural media, will carry some information about that. The Agri-News and the Pro Farmer, they'll be talking about our reports, and again, they'll interpret what it means to the future of agriculture.
So how does a producer use some of these numbers?
In many ways, they're using our numbers indirectly by looking at something like the Farm Doc website, or they may have an advisor they pay, a broker of sorts, and those people will be looking very closely at NASS reports and at worldwide supply and demand, and they'll be helping individual producers cost out and budget next year's crop and things like that.
Okay. Now, the report you just reported on had some interesting information, I thought. One was the trend in livestock production in the state. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you see as some of the issues behind those trends?
Over a long haul, let's say 40 years, the number of cattle and hogs in Illinois has declined significantly. The main cause, I think, is that there's just been a change in farming practices. A generation ago, virtually every farm had some crops and some livestock. They were what we might call integrated farms. And that was the way that people did business a generation ago. And that hasn't been the same since probably the 60s or 70s, where really the basic strategy was, if you're going to be a grain producer, be a good one. Be an expert grain producer and don't spend your time with cattle or hogs. We still have some integrated farms with crops and livestock, but mostly Illinois has become a crop state. About 80% of total agricultural sales in the state are from crops and about 20% from livestock.
Why is that?
I can't tell you all the reasons for it, other than a general change across farming, a generational type of change. Another thing might be, though, the Illinois infrastructure may be a little bit better suited to crops. With intrastate waterways and easy access to the Mississippi and then therefore to export markets, that may have been a little bit better for grain production.
Okay. Talk about grain production. Continuing up, corn, more and more corn. What do your reports show about grain production?
I would say there's two things. Corn and soybeans dominate this state. The other crops, in particular sorghum and oats, have been declining for years, and they're becoming quite small. The wheat crop has also declined, but Some of that was essentially significant weather events in the fall of 2009 prohibited many farmers from actually planting the wheat they wanted to harvest in 2010. So that was just a one-year weather event. Since then, wheat acres have rebounded nicely, but still it's under 1 million, and we used to be at 2 and 3 million in the past.
So, you were talking about some technology you use to supplement your reports, your satellite technology and that sort of stuff. Talk a little bit about that.
We've been using satellite imagery on sort of a test basis for quite a while. And as the technology in the sky gets better, we're finding it does a pretty good job of estimating corn yields. It's difficult to turn it into a number, like the county average yield was 165.2. That can be difficult. But the satellite is able to tell that this county was better than that county. That's not too hard for corn. Now, on the other hand, for soybeans, it's just not working that well. It just, you can't see the soybean yield from the sky. You can't see it from the road either, not at 50 miles an hour. You got to get out in the soybean field. You got to count pods.
Right. Okay. And your report also showed that some states did better this year in yields than other states. How did Illinois rank, and what were some of the reasons for our ranking?
I don't have a precise ranking.
Well,
Our current forecast is 156 bushels per acre on corn, which is, I think, disappointing for Illinois producers. Early on in August, the crop in general was planted on time. And so the August forecast was actually at 170 bushels per acre for the state average, which was, I think, would have been very nice. We've declined several months since. We're at 156. We're working on finalizing that number. And I think the biggest issue is that July and August were very dry in some spots. There are significant differences from one part of the state to another. I think if you look at northwestern Illinois, it would be a significant contrast to, let's say, Champaign and McLean counties, Illinois.
Okay. Now, one last thing. You talked about the rural census.
The agricultural census. Every 5 years, that's right.
Okay. Talk a little bit about that, and why should farmers participate?
The Census of Agriculture is done every 5 years. The next reference year is 2012. So at the end of the year 2012, about 1 year from now, producers all over the state will be getting a Census of Agriculture in the mail. Please fill it out and send it back in the postage paid envelope. It provides the most detailed count by county of all types of crop and livestock production. So some of the lesser known species of livestock, so we have bison farms in this state. We actually have a decent number of producers that are raising pheasants and game birds that get released into the wild, and there's an income there for people. On the crop side, we do grow strawberries and blueberries and other lesser known crops that we don't spend a lot of time measuring on an annual basis, but every 5 years, let's see what else is happening. Let's see what's growing out there. Maybe there's a new industry for things like horseradish in Illinois is a big thing. We do not do any annual surveys of horseradish, but every 5 years we count it in the Census of Agriculture.
Excellent. Well, so if you get a form, fill it out.
That's the right thing to do.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate your time.
You're very welcome, Fred.
Well, Monica is off this week, so the B team is here to give you the latest ag news. Citing a continued vulnerability of Illinois farms, several agricultural groups and state and federal agencies are forming the Illinois Agri-Security Working Group. Some of the participating agencies include the FBI, the Illinois Farm Bureau, Illinois Corn Growers, the statewide Terrorism and Intelligence Center, and the Illinois Emergency Management Agency. The group hopes to develop plans and information to help farmers detect potential threats to the food supply and to food processing. Well, let's hope it doesn't lead to having to take your boots off prior to entering your tractor. Well, there are some new developments in drainage water management. Field tile has helped farmers manage excess water for decades. It's very efficient. Still, there have been some improvements over time, and Todd Gleason reports on 2 of the new options.
During this season's 15th annual University of Illinois Extension Corn and Soybean Classic, farmers and agribusiness professionals were told about some new techniques for managing water in a farm field. Richard Cook, water drainage specialist, says it's possible to do more than just drain the water.
Two main practices which we have now in Illinois. One is drainage water management, which is a practice where you would change outlet level to change the intensity of drainage depending on the need. So you'll need, say, less intensity over the winter period than when you need to prepare your seed bed, so we can adjust it that way. And another practice is the use of subsurface bioreactors, which is an edge of field practice where we divert the water just before it leaves the field through a trench, a subsurface trench filled with wood chips, where bacteria can break down the nitrates in the water.
So the farmer installs on an existing or a brand new tile system a water control structure used to control how much water is in the field, trapping it there or draining it out, and a bioreactor filled with wood chips through which the water can pass. It will remove nitrates.
It's possible to use them together. As a matter of fact, we did some work in Lake Decatur watershed where we looked at combination of drainage, water management, and bioreactors. And some of the benefits from using them together is, with drainage water management, where you say raise the outlet level, then there's a possibility if you have a big storm in the winter, you can get some additional runoff and erosion. But if we pass the water through a subsurface bioreactor, then we reduce this. So we have a win-win situation.
Win-win because both structures, the control or weir and the bioreactor, both can decrease the nitrate load coming from the field tile, and that is good for the environment. Farmers interested in the control structure should contact the Natural Resources Conservation Service. There is a cost share program available through NRCS. For University of Illinois Extension, I'm Todd Gleason.
Soybean producers have some new research to digest. Researchers at The Ohio State University and the University of Illinois are working to find a genetic approach to fight one of the soybeans' worst pests, the cyst nematode. Farmers have been planting cyst nematode-resistant varieties of soybeans for a while now, but research has shown that the pests have adapted, often making excellent growing years merely average. The researchers are trying to develop a genetic map and a quick test to determine which varieties of soybeans are most resistant to the cyst nematodes in their area. Farmers need a choice, says Chris Lambert of the University of Illinois. Nematodes can be managed using natural host plant resistance and crop rotation, if you use the right plants. And that buzzing you hear may just be some pollinating partners. Even if soybeans are bred to be self-pollinating, researchers at Iowa State have found that bees and other pollinators have taken a liking to soybeans, to the plant's benefit. They have found close to 2,000 pollinators representing over 30 species in the soybean fields. The biggest group appears to be the green metallic bees, who are ground nesting. But how much help are these little stingers? Well, a 2005 Brazilian report shows that a 50% higher yield with the help of bees. Sound to me like a pretty sweet deal. Well, it's February, and Lynette Mensa's here to tell me about the most important month of the year. Maybe. What is February?
Well, February is American Heart Health Month. Okay. And this is a month where basically we're trying to remind everyone that you need to be concerned with heart health.
Well, we all have a heart. We all hopefully it's healthy. Mm-hmm. So what sort of things do we think about all year long, but in particular in February and Heart Month?
Well, with Heart Month, what we want to do is to remind everyone to pay particular attention to the things that can cause heart disease.
Okay, what sort of things?
Okay, for instance, overweight and obesity. Mm-hmm. That's one of a very leading cause of that. The other thing is try to start monitoring your blood pressure.
Okay.
Okay, and get out and start doing some physical activity. More of that.
The old threesome. Yes. Weight, exercise, and
blood pressure. And
yeah, well, okay, guilty and guilty.
Okay.
But so obesity, blood pressure, and exercise.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's start with the eating problem.
Right.
Okay. How can we go ahead and tailor our eating habits to help improve our weight and our blood pressure?
Okay, what you want to do is to focus on the foods that are the healthier kinds of foods in our diet, and eat less of those foods that tend to cause us those issues and those problems.
Well, those are always the fun ones, aren't they?
They tend to be the more fun ones, but you can have a little bit of fun, but you don't want to go overboard with the fun.
So, yeah, so what foods should we be looking for? What in the foods should we be looking out for?
Okay, well, number one, you want to be careful about the fat intake.
Okay.
And we're talking total fat. Okay, and then in addition to total fat, you want to make sure that you really watch the saturated fats that are in your diet.
Okay.
The saturated fats and the cholesterol. The saturated fat, first of all, is the one that tends to have the cholesterol in it. And foods like your eggs and meat, the fat around your meat, and those kinds of fatty kind of foods from animal sources. Those are the foods that tend to be the foods that are high in saturated fat. So you want to eat more lean meat. If you want to eat meat, eat the lean meat, and then eat healthier fats.
Okay, so 30% total of your diet on fats.
Yeah, no more than that.
You know, there's good fats, and there's some fats that are good, less bad for you than other fats, right?
Right, right. And the fats that you want to maybe eat a little bit more of would be the polyunsaturates and the monounsaturated.
Okay, but still 30% is a good target to aim for.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to have anything more than that in your diet.
Okay. Now, the other factor is sodium.
Yes.
And I have to admit, I like salty.
Right.
A lot of people do. A lot of people do, and that line is a long one and forms behind. So, what sort of things? We're not just talking salt, though, are we?
We're talking anything that contains sodium, which includes salt. Salt is, and all the different types of salt, including sea salt and some of the others, the kosher salt, is still salt.
Right.
It still contains sodium. So the recommendation is no more than 2,300 milligrams for a normal person, but many times if you're over 50 years of age, and particularly some ethnic groups, really the recommendation is 1,500
Wow, that's a big
with
difference.
the new dietary guidelines. And it is very difficult, so you really have to make sure that you're reading labels and things like that.
2,300 milligrams is what?
Approximately 1 teaspoon.
Oh my.
Okay. 1
Okay.
teaspoon, and that's not much. And that's a whole day.
Right. Okay, well.
Yeah, and then 1,500, that's even.
Okay, well, that's why my wife has removed the salt shaker from the table. And,
right.
Oh, well.
Right.
So, physical activity is an important component too, isn't it?
Absolutely. We are probably one of the more obese now than we ever have. And I don't want to just say obese, overweight and obesity, okay, because those are clinical definitions, basically. But if you are overweight or finding yourself getting over what your weight should be, the physical activity is very, very important. Doesn't mean you have to go out and jog a marathon and things like that, but just get up and walk a little bit, 10 minutes, 3 times a day, can be something to get you started.
Now, a lot of our viewers are farmers, and they work really hard. Okay, they get up in the morning and they're out there and they're doing and they're putzing around and they're plowing and they're, is that an excuse to eat fun stuff?
It's not an excuse. If you're generally in good health, you still need to be a little bit aware that the saturated fats and the sodium can still get you over time. Okay, so instead of eating the bacon and the butter and all that great tasting stuff, you may still want to try to interject some high fiber in your diet. Eat leaner meats. Be careful of the fat that's in your gravies, and maybe use instead of butter, use soft spreads because they tend to be a little less in cholesterol.
Okay, and the idea of the big farmer breakfast and the big farmer lunch, and then sit-down dinner while you fall asleep on the recliner is not the way to go?
Well, no, not really, because, I mean, yeah, days pass and you work all that off, but then when you see the longevity in general, we're living a little longer now than we used to, but only because of the physical activity that's involved, but you still have to watch your diet. We know already that high-fat foods, from animal sources like your eggs and your bacon and stuff. It doesn't mean you can't eat it, but just be sensible with it.
Okay, so Lynette, I'm afraid you're bringing me the news that we got to use the second biggest muscle in the body.
Yeah,
or maybe it's the biggest muscle. I don't know. Heart first, brain second. Who knows? Anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, so far this winter we've missed so many bullets, I feel like Neo from the Matrix. Well, we have 50, 60-degree weather, rain and sleet instead of 0 and -10 and snow and ice. I don't know whether I should relax and enjoy it or start evolving again. Cameron Craig wraps up the month of January on this week's Under the Four River Sky.
For some, winter has been a disappointment. For others, it has been quite enjoyable. In most of the mines here in central Illinois, winter is supposed to be painted with landscapes of white and the air fresh and crisp. However, this January felt more like the beginning of spring. This January was a stark difference from January a year ago. January 2011 ended with an average temperature of 25.3 degrees, coming in at 3.3 degrees below normal. It was also a very snowy beginning to 2011, with 8.9 inches of snow and a dry month as well. The average temperature this January was 33.7 degrees, which was 5.1 degrees above the 30-year average of 28.6 degrees. Precipitation was slightly under a half an inch above the 30-year average, with 2.85 inches of melted precipitation. The total snowfall for January 2012 was 2.2 inches. During the month, we had 3 days that the maximum temperature reached 60 degrees. The first occurrence was on the 6th of January with a maximum temperature of 62 degrees. This was associated with a warm front that passed the region the previous day, putting central Illinois in the warm sector of the storm system. Southerly winds associated with the high pressure to the southeast pumped warm air from the Gulf. On the 17th, another strong warm front pushed through the region associated with southerly winds, increasing the daytime high to only 60 degrees. The last day of January, the daytime high once again hit 60 degrees. Again, the warm temperatures were associated with a warm front that stretched across the Midwest to the Northwest Pacific region. There were only 2 days in the month that the minimum temperature dropped to the single digits. The minimum temperature for both the 12th and the 14th was 9 degrees. The second minimum temperature was 10 degrees on the 20th. So why did January have such a warm average temperature? In the equatorial Pacific, La Niña was moderate to strong in January 2011. La Niña this winter has continued to be weak to moderate. However, the main culprit is the position of the jet stream. Last January, the average jet stream was more amplified and further to the south. This year, the average position of the jet stream has been more to the north. The reason behind the jet remaining to the north is due to an oscillation that indicates the strength of the jet stream called the Arctic Oscillation. The positive phase of the Arctic Oscillation keeps temperatures north of the jet stream colder than normal and the region south of the jet stream warmer than normal. The recent cold Arctic air that has blasted Europe indicates that the Arctic Oscillation is shifting to a negative phase and could allow cold air to once again migrate south over the eastern half of the United States by mid-February. Does all of this sound complicated to you? It probably does. However, some people are extremely happy about the abnormal temperatures, while others want winter to make a significant visit. With warmer than normal temperatures at the surface, some vegetation has already begun to show signs of growth throughout the northern portion of the United States. On the other hand, the warmer conditions increase the potential of pests in the spring. An extremely cold winter helps reduce those pest populations. However, the warm conditions allow insect populations to remain constant. Therefore, it is important for our region to have a significant period of cold Arctic air to keep those pests in check. The 30-day outlook for February will continue to be warmer than normal with above normal precipitation. That's not to say we won't have a few snow events throughout February, but for those of us who enjoy the wintry scenes that play repeatedly in our minds, keep your fingers crossed because at some point the big snow will arrive. That's it from me this week. Protect our home and always say thank you to our farmers.
And finally, Babe the pig found fame and fortune by herding a bunch of sheep. Well, he better watch his ham hocks because I found his competition. A farmer in Sweden has found that his rabbit, Champis, loves to herd the ewes in his flock. Apparently learned how to do this by watching the other farm dogs. Well, I could talk some more, but instead, let's just watch. That will do, Bunny. That will do. Well, that's it for this week. Work hard, be safe, and enjoy the beautiful sunsets. I'm Fred Peralta, and thanks for watching the Four Rivers Ag Report.